wanting to help you supercharge your savings.
UCCU is offering high-rate savings options with yields up to 5.5%. All you do is go to UCCU.com and select a high-rate savings option to do just what you said, supercharge your savings.
You're going to get a much bigger return on your savings right now. It's a savings certificate, which means you make one deposit up front and your money grows over a fixed period of time. So you can have that grow over 5 years, but UCCU has created some very short-term savings certificates with high yields, short like 6 months, 9 months, or a year.
So you decide how long do you want to put that money. You deposit money, a one-time only deposit, and then you let it stay in. The longer it stays in there, the higher the interest rate you earn.
And if you need immediate access to your money, UCCU's Money Market will give you a high yield and anytime access.
UCCU, you're going to love where you bank.
Made to Shine. Real stories from Shane Company customers.
I was 20 years old, stationed in Hawaii, and 2 weeks before I was deployed, I met the love of my life. The second I returned, I bought a cheap ring at the Base Exchange and proposed. 15 years later, I went to Shane Company and got her a one-of-a-kind ring with a pear-shaped diamond. It's the ring she deserves.
Shine forever with Shane Company's hand-selected diamonds, as unique as your love story. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
We have breaking news at this hour. The U.S. Senate office buildings in Washington, D.C. have been evacuated following a concerning 911 call. U.S. Capitol Police tweeted there was a call about a possible active shooter, but they say they have not confirmed any gunshots. Our KSL traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Crews still working to clear this crash. Westbound I-80 at the Bangerter Highway on-ramp. It's over to the right. And a slide-off on the transition ramp from westbound I-80 to southbound I-215's West Belt. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, cooler today, and we've already seen some thunderstorms this afternoon, more possibly this evening. Today's high 87, tomorrow 84, and it'll dry out and warm up through the weekend. 71 degrees with a thunder shower right now at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
All the headlines today, of course, are focused around the indictment of former President Donald Trump regarding his actions taken on January the 6th. This adds to the list of indictments piling up around the former president. But we wanted to go beyond the headline today. We wanted to take a look at what the indictment said, what it didn't say, what is clear, and what is unclear, and how all this relates to 2024. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
We are very thrilled to have back on the program once again Sarah Isker, of course, from our friends at The Dispatch, and has a new newsletter coming out. We'll get to that in a minute, called appropriately The Collision. We'll talk about why it's The Collision coming up. But obviously a lot of the chatter over the last 24 hours has been about the former president, Donald Trump, new indictment. Some things are pretty clear-cut and some things less so, and Sarah helps us straighten all of that out. And Sarah, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, always.
So let's start with some of the things as you looked at you've watched this so closely coming up to this indictment. So tell us the things that we know for sure, because there's a lot of the chatter is all out there. But give us what do we really know about this indictment? What are the clear components to this?
Absolutely. So this is the special counsel, Jack Smith. He was given 3 mandates by Attorney General Merrick Garland when he was first appointed, remember, right in the wake of Donald Trump announcing for president. So 1, to look at the documents issues at Mar-a-Lago, obstruction issues related to that, and then number 3, Donald Trump's actions in the wake of the election through January 6th. That's this. That's what this indictment was. It's that third bucket on January 6th. Jack Smith brought 4 charges. There were 6 unindicted co-conspirators, and those 4 charges sort of fell roughly into 4 topics, if you will. And the charges don't necessarily correlate exactly to the topics, et cetera, but it was 4 charges and 4 topics. And look, my overall take on this is that whereas the Florida indictment, that the documents and the obstruction, were just super clear cut. They're very narrow, specific laws about willfully retaining national security information. The facts met the elements of the crime. It's going to be a very straightforward trial. This is almost the opposite. They're very broad, vague laws that they're applying here. And the facts of what Donald Trump did are going to be much harder to fit into those laws as well. The biggest problem that I think they're going to have is that they're going to have to prove Donald Trump's state of mind. That is always a hard thing to prove in any criminal trial, but here when you're dealing with Donald Trump and having to prove his state of mind, they have to show that when he was out there saying the election was stolen, that there was rampant election fraud, all of those things, that he wasn't just saying something that wasn't true, but that he knew it wasn't true. So, they're going to parade out at trial every single election fraud claim he made. They're going to prove that it was untrue. They're going to show you every person who told him that his claims were untrue, from his attorney general, his White House lawyers, state officials. If they prove all of those things, it will not be enough unless they can also prove that Donald Trump knew he was lying.
Yeah, so that is the unclear part, and plus you get into the whole First Amendment issues that are kind of tangential to all of that, but that mindset component, we always joke around here that understanding the behavior of a politician these days is like trying to smell the color 7, and I think they're going to have to prove that in the court of law to understand what the former president was thinking about when he was president and what he was saying on those days, and that might be harder than trying to smell the color 7. So that is the very unclear component to all of that. You also mentioned on the Dispatch today some things that are a little more clear, and a lot of that has to do with the politics of it. Describe that for us.
Well, this isn't happening in a vacuum. We can talk about the law, and we can talk about, specific intent, what the word corruptly means. And obviously, I'm a huge nerd, and I find that really fun. But you can't forget the context in which this is happening. And you're going to have Republican primary voters looking at this and seeing a special counsel who reports to the attorney general, who's an appointee of President Biden, bringing criminal charges against his political opponent. And I think it feeds this narrative for Republican primary voters that Donald Trump is the only one who can withstand this sort of pressure, and that they would be doing this against any Republican. And I think that's kind of dangerous for the country. And I think that it also feeds this idea of, Republicans, you'll hear them say there's a two-tiered justice system, right? When you ask them about the Florida case, the documents case, they're going to tell you, look, yeah, maybe, but that's a paper crime. Literally, it involves pieces of paper. He was president, whatever. And you have Joe Biden, on the other hand, whose son is making millions from foreign corporations, telling these corporations that he has influence over his father. So either he was lying to them and his father knew that he was sort of falsely selling influence because he knows his son is taking the millions of dollars.
Right.
Or he was influencing his father. And either way, that should be a huge scandal. It should be illegal. It should be investigated. And nobody's spending time talking about that. And in the meantime, look what's happening to Donald Trump. So politically, you can see why Republicans are rallying around Donald Trump, why he's getting stronger as a nominee and not weaker. And at the same time, imagine what this trial is going to look and feel like next summer.
Yeah.
And, as a presidential election heats up and you have one guy charging the other guy, right, prosecuting the other guy, I think that we're heading in a very dark, bad place, even though I think everyone's acting in good faith. I think Jack Smith, as the prosecutor here, he has a long history at the Department of Justice. He's an aggressive prosecutor. If you get into his crosshairs, he is going to get you. But, if anything, he's a center-right guy. He's not political. I think that this is actually a case of lawyers not being political enough, not thinking through the larger consequences of what a trial will look like for the country.
Yeah, and I think what the trial looks like matters. As you were saying that, Sarah, I had visions of Venezuela or North Korea or this targeting of political opponents and going about it that way. Just the look of it, and I'm with you. I think they're acting in good faith. I think they're doing their jobs and doing it the right way. The question then becomes, what does this do? We've already entered this space where trust in the institutions of government has really waned, and not just Congress. That's always been kind of a low number, but now we're losing that trust in institutions across from the Supreme Court on down. What does that mean, and what should we be watching for, and what should we be thinking as citizens as we watch this kind of play out?
we used to make jokes about Congress being at like 12% approval. I mean, they really earned it. They've
Yes.
spent hundreds of years earning their reputation. But you're right. Now that we see it happening to other institutions, it's like, oh, wait, maybe I shouldn't have been quite so glib about Congress's approval rating. In particular, I'm concerned about the overall loss of faith in our justice system.
Yeah.
Because I think that you can think Congress sucks. And by the way, it was always a funny part of those. Congress would have a 12% approval rating. But when you ask someone about their individual congressman, they're like, oh, yeah, Bob Smith.
Good.
Right? And you're like, what?
We call that the Dennis Rodman syndrome. Everybody hated Dennis Rodman unless he was your Dennis Rodman. Then he was okay.
Right? It's like, where do you think that guy goes to work every day? Congress. What? Okay. And so you have something really corrosive when people don't think that judges are deciding cases based on the law and the facts. And if they're just deciding it based on their whims or their political beliefs or their political preferences. And I think that's bad enough at the Supreme Court level, and you and I have talked about that in plenty of cases where the headlines are just dripping with politics but don't actually get to what the case was about. Supreme Court strikes down gun ban instead of Congress failed to pass gun ban.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's very frustrating for me. But it's going to be so much worse if it's seeping into our criminal justice system as well. Because if you think that a political side simply uses the criminal justice system to target their political enemies, we're certainly starting to see huge cracks in this experiment in self-government that we've been running for 247 years.
Yeah. You've taken on, I don't know how you take on one more project at the Dispatch because I don't know where your extra 3 minutes of your day are happening between 2:30 and 2:33 a.m. But you have added, in addition to other things, The Collision, a new newsletter, and was actually joking with your tag team partner on it, Michael Warren, the other day that I always said that the 2016 election, the caption should have been hubcap rolling. And, you have the big crash scene, everything goes black, and the last thing you hear is the hubcap rolling away. You've gone with The Collision, which is a little more noble, but it actually has an important component to all of this cross-section, this intersection of the law and the politics. So just kind of give us a little teaser in terms of what we should expect coming up in The Collision.
You bet. So, the idea is that this election cycle is not just going to be horse race polling and who's ahead and who's behind, but it's going to require talking about these indictments and the law and the way that the law is going to collide with the politics, whether we're talking about the GOP primary and Donald Trump or the general election and Joe Biden and Donald Trump. There's a lot of indictments flying around these days. And so Mike Warren is a reporter who I had actually worked with a lot back in my operative days. I joke with Mike, back in the 2016 cycle, we'd throw Mike in the back of our SUV with Carly Fiorina, and that's how they did a bunch of their interviews. So I've known Mike for a long time and just respected the hell out of him as a reporter. And so when he sort of came up with this idea of us pairing up together, I'll sort of explain the law and he'll run down some of the politics. It's been a great partnership. And my favorite part is him asking me questions about these cases, because it's perfect. Because then I'm like, oh, I didn't even think of that question. That's helpful to even know what the questions are that we're trying to answer.
Fantastic. It is one I'm looking forward to, again, as part of the Dispatch, thedispatch.com, a new newsletter coming out called The Collision that'll feature Sarah along with Mike Warren. And Sarah, of course, is senior editor of the Dispatch. She's also host of the Advisory Opinions podcast and just one of our favorite thinkers. And I love the way that you explore all of this and help us get down to what does it actually mean and why and where do we go next. Sarah Isgur, thank you so much for joining us once again on Inside Sources.
Thank you. You are always so kind to us. We appreciate everything that you do and say and how much you try to explain all of this in totally helpful, easy to understand ways. So thank you for what you do.
So many things to unpack as it relates to the indictment of former President Donald Trump. There are many things that are known. There are a host of things that are unknown. The perception of how this rolls out is going to matter to the American public, especially as you juxtapose that against other indictments that are going on, both against the president and against President Biden's son, Hunter. And so how this goes about, the transparency is going to be important, but how we have the conversation, I think, is what's going to actually matter the most.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. BYU Fall Camp gets underway this week. Join us each day at 7:55 and 5:55 for updates on the practice mashups and the Big 12 season to come. BYU Sports Insider Mitch Harper will be live with the latest. Mornings and afternoons all week on KSL News Radio, your legacy home for BYU football.
Would you be upset if you lost $111,000 in retirement income? Get this, 96% of Americans, 96% lose an average of $111,000 in Social Security income. Learn how you could avoid this in a free report, the Social Security Decisions Guide from Boss Retirement Solutions, a 5-time winner of Utah's Best of State Award. If you saved at least $200,000 and have not filed for Social Security, get this free report by calling 801-682-4448. This free report is loaded with critical information that can help you avoid losing $111,000 in Social Security income. So call 801-682-4448. That's 801-682-4448. Advisory services offered through Boss Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Insurance products and services offered through Boss Retirement Solutions.
If you've had painful kidney stones, you know you don't want more. Moonstone Stone Stopper is a simple solution that works. Created and recommended by top kidney stone doctors, Stone Stopper is an alkali citrate formula scientifically proven to prevent crystallization. Stone Stopper's patented formula is gentle on the stomach and is available in easy-to-swallow capsules, gummies, and powder drinks that make hydration delicious. Stone Stopper is available at participating Walmart and Walgreens stores. Look for the red stop sign on the bottom shelf of the vitamin aisle. For more information or to find a store near you, go to stonestopper.com.
Troy, do you believe in fortune tellers?
Not really. Why?
Camping's been so epic this year, I need to know if we'll get extra summer.
Is that the deal with the black message pool ball?
All signs point to yes.
Well, summer's always longer when you've got an RV.
Is that true? The ball says yes.
People in RVs can camp all through fall, and we want everyone to experience that. So right now, Bish's RV is throwing a Summer Forever sale. Get low monthly payments starting under $149 per month on approved credit.
Okay, that's crazy low, no?
Ball says decidedly so.
We're also hooking people up with 90 days of all play, no pay OAC?
Definitely. Plus, all remaining new 2022s are priced to move with no single reasonable offer refused.
And trades are worth like more than ever, right?
No doubt in sight.
This thing is never wrong. Paranormal pool ball, am I handsome? Better not tell you. Wait.
Extend your season for summer memories during the Summer Forever sale at Bish's RV in North Salt Lake and American Fork. Previously Stewart's RV. Bish's RV, where memories begin.
Based on 10% down, 9.24% APR for 180 months. Not all buyers will qualify. See dealer for details.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a truck driver died last night when his semi lost its brakes in Parley's Canyon and crashed into a construction site in Sugar House. Second, teachers in the Jordan School District will be getting a pay raise, while property owners in the district will get a tax increase. And third, a federal court in Pittsburgh has decided on the death penalty for the man convicted of killing 11 people at a synagogue. Right now, 77 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Dave and Dujanovic on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. In a statement that was released on Friday, the White House has announced that President Biden will be hosting the leaders of South Korea and Japan for a Camp David summit this month. The summit will focus on strengthening the bonds and expanding cooperation across the Indo-Pacific. And there's a host of things inside of that. One that is interesting to me is that it's the first time a foreign leader will actually visit Camp David since President Biden took office. Camp David, of course, has hosted many very fascinating conversations over the decades, and we expect this summit to be a very interesting one as well. So we're going to take a little deeper look at that. Really pleased to have joining us on the program Laura Kelly, foreign policy reporter for The Hill, and a great piece in The Hill today, really framing out what this should look like and what we can expect. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So give us some perspective, just kind of the high level first, in terms of why these two particular leaders, why now, why Camp David?
Yes, well, as you mentioned, it will be the first visit by foreign leaders to Camp David since President Biden took office, and it's actually the first summit there since 2015, so that was during the Obama administration. And President Biden has seen the leaders of South Korea and Japan kind of frequently. So I think the location of Camp David is kind of a signal to show the respect and admiration he has for these two countries and for this trilateral summit format in general. So President Biden last saw President Yoon from South Korea and Prime Minister Kishida from Japan. They saw each other at the NATO summit in Lithuania in July, at the G7 summit in Hiroshima in May. And the last time they held a trilateral meeting together was in November 2022 in Phnom Penh in Cambodia on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. And I think it's also important to point out that Biden hosted South Korea's President Yoon for a state visit in April. So again, this is another signal of the importance that the administration is putting on the relationship. And Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, while not given a state visit, he had a pretty robust visit to Washington in January.
Yeah, both of those things are so interesting. Give us some perspective as it relates to what is happening with China and what's going on with North Korea. And how this might serve to kind of counter some of that aggressiveness, whether it's economic or military, from both of those countries.
Right. So, North Korea's nuclear provocations have increased over the past couple of months. And last year in particular, I think it was the most missile launches and tests that North Korea has carried out since it has started carrying out these missile tests. And so for the U.S., South Korea, Japan, and other governments, they condemn these actions. And so the trilateral summit will really allow them to come together and issue a joint statement of their concerns, and also work together on what their strategy will be in approaching North Korea. And the dynamics at this point are particularly fraught. We saw Chinese and Russian officials travel to North Korea recently to sort of celebrate the 70th anniversary of the armistice agreement that ended the fighting of the Korean War. But on top of North Korea's military provocations, the U.S. accuses it of sending weapons to Russia for use in Ukraine. The U.S. has sanctions against North Korea aimed at disrupting its illicit financing schemes, largely through cyber hacking. So all of these topics, I think, are going to be part of the summit. And I think it's also important to note that the U.S., while having tense relations with China, nonetheless views Beijing as an actor that doesn't want to see North Korea go any more rogue with its nuclear program. So U.S. and China relations have an element of trying to find a way to work together to rein in North Korea's most worrying military activity. So this could also be a topic of conversation among the three countries.
That's so important. I'm so glad you raised that because often we talk about this, head-to-head with China or head-to-head with Russia. It's one of those allies and alliances kinds of things because if we're going to deal with North Korea, we actually have to have China and Russia on board for anything to actually have any teeth, especially as it relates to nuclear. So I appreciate that perspective. Give me a sense from the Biden administration in terms of the messages they need to send. There has been kind of this season between Afghanistan and between Ukraine and some of the other things going on around the world that some people have kind of questioned the U.S. Will the U.S. really be there for you when it matters? How does the president approach this particular meeting? What do you think is his priority in terms of the message or the relationship he wants to galvanize with South Korea and Japan?
The U.S. has, President Biden in particular, has affirmed and reaffirmed American commitment to the defense of Japan and South Korea. in particular the nuclear threats from North Korea. The U.S. signed the Washington Declaration with South Korea during President Yoon's visit in April, and this extended the U.S. nuclear umbrella over South Korea, and which is also extended over Japan, and is meant to be a signal of deterrence against North Korea, saying any threat or attack against South Korea or Japan will bring to bear the weight of the U.S. military, including its nuclear weapons. So this is a signal that we hear from the administration in their commitment to South Korea and Japan. But an important aspect of this summit is deepening the relationship not only among the three countries, but among South Korea and Japan with each other. In particular, the two countries have a very fraught history. Japan occupied South Korea in the first half of the 20th century, and there is upset among the South Korean public. They don't think Japan has gone far enough in atoning for its crimes. So even as you see the South Korean president and the Japanese prime minister have these public engagements on the world stage, it's not entirely clear how far they have actually come in reconciling these historic grievances. So a big part of the summit will also be to kind of put forward this united front between the three countries, and that serves to really push back against North Korea, against China and Russia.
So important. And just 30 seconds, anything kind of under the radar, under the headlines that you're going to be watching for as this plays out?
I think the big aspect is kind of what are we going to see the dynamics between South Korea and Japan during this meeting. But otherwise, I think we can expect a continuation of the statements and the progress that comes with many of these meetings that have taken place either between President Biden and the leaders or different levels of officials that have met throughout the course of the last couple of years.
Fantastic. Great insight, Laura Kelly, foreign policy reporter for The Hill. Folks, that is what breaking down an international issue sounds like. Laura, thanks so much for joining us today. Fantastic insight.
Thank you.
Again, that's Laura Kelly from The Hill. That is great analysis. Two important allies for the United States, South Korea and Japan, coming to Camp David. That's an important meeting. We'll continue to watch it on KSL News Radio. We'll be right back after bottom of the hour news.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story at this hour. We have developing news. People in the U.S. Senate office buildings in Washington, D.C. have been told to shelter in place following a concerning 911 call. U.S. Capitol Police have tweeted that there was a call about a possible active shooter, but they say they have not yet confirmed any gunshots that have actually happened. The Thermo Fisher Company is closing down a facility in Ogden. This is a plant that only opened a year ago. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe has exclusive details. Amy?
Dan, I'm just outside the Thermo Fisher Scientific Building here in Ogden, where it's completely empty. The parking lot is abandoned today. The company spokesperson told me that they are temporarily ceasing operations here. This is after the company fired dozens of people at their Logan facility earlier this year. And it's a big surprise to people here because the plant only opened in April of last year. The company reported that they had spent $44 million to build this site here. It's not totally clear why the temporary closure is happening, but the company did report a $10 billion loss in revenue in their last quarterly report. That's compared to last year. Reporting live in Ogden, Amy Kobabe, KSL News Radio.
In national news, a jury in Pittsburgh today has unanimously recommended the Tree of Life synagogue gunman be put to death. Robert Bowers was convicted in June of killing 11 worshipers 4.5 years ago. We have more from ABC News senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katersky.
Most of the statements that we've received from the families, from the synagogues that are housed within this building, have all simply expressed gratitude for the jurors' commitment. Even the judge appeared almost on the verge of tears as he was thanking the jury for their service because it was such an emotional case.
And the shooting was the worst anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average Near the close of trading here, down 402 points. The NASDAQ also down sharply, 336 points right now. And our KSL weather, we're seeing more thunderstorms this afternoon. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
This summer, the political season heats up.
By August, it'll be time for debates. Can you believe it?
We're planning coverage of the real issues, the important stories that impact how we live.
Listen each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
When you crash your car, you get it fixed. When your computer crashes, you get a new one. But what will you do if you've been saving in a 401k or an IRA and the market crashes? If you're in your 30s or 40s, you'll be just fine. But if you're in or near retirement, you could be in trouble. Mike Stevens and his team at Capital Wealth Advisors are here to help. They can run a risk analysis to see if you're too heavily invested in the market. Don't let the ups and downs of Wall Street control you or your retirement dreams. Call 801-210-5500 today to schedule your risk analysis with Mike Stevens and the team at Capital Wealth Advisors. That's 801-210-5500. Crashes happen. Question is, are you ready? Capital Wealth Advisors, 801-210-5500. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Capital Wealth Advisors, LLC, a state of Utah registered investment advisor.
Smart, connected, modern. Discover life-enhancing independent living services at Trio South Ogden. They do things a little differently there because you're different. With everything you need to support your best self, you'll find that joy isn't just for the young, it's for the young of heart. Trio South Ogden's signature programs provide a unique approach to wellness that brings living well and well-being to life. To learn more, contact Trio South Ogden at 801-475-4004 or visit triosouthodden.com.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance. For your free quote, call SelectQuote at 1-800-330-1991. That's 1-800-330-1991. Or go to SelectQuote.com. That's 1-800-330-1991. SelectQuote. We shop, you save. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
The rain still causing problems for drivers on the west side of Salt Lake County. Just two of the many accidents that remain. One is northbound I-215's West Bell, California Avenue, partially blocking a right lane of traffic. And then a nasty accident westbound I-80 after Bangerter Highway, about 4500 west, blocking right lanes. That's backing traffic to I-215. Save up to $1,000 on a new mattress during Snooze Mattress Company's grand opening celebration in Pleasant Grove. Come experience their exclusive dream mapping technology. Get mapped, get fitted, get sleep. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather cooler today with a chance of thunderstorms this afternoon and evening. Today's high 87, tomorrow 84. It'll dry out and warm up through the weekend. 70 degrees right now with some rain at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, Fitch Ratings has downgraded the United States government credit rating, as they had warned they would do. The rating dropped from a AAA to a AA+. And even though it's only a drop one notch, it's still a significant move. And that, of course, has created a negative response from the Biden administration and from Wall Street. So we want to get into what does this actually mean? How will the downgrade affect the economy? What does it mean for the market? Can we recover? What's the path back for all of this? And to help us break all of that down and really make the news make sense, really pleased to have Mark Goldwein, Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And Mark, welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
So first, just for our listeners, let's just break this down. Describe what is the Fitch rating and what does it really mean to go from a AAA to a AA+.
Yeah, so there are three major rating agencies that try to assess the risk of the U.S. government. Now, 2 out of 3 of them have dropped their ratings from AAA, which means extremely safe, to AA+, which means very safe. And so this drop means we're less safe than we were before, but still quite safe of an asset overall, and still a pretty good place for investors to put their money.
All right. And so as we look at that downgrade, what are some of the negative impacts of that? And then I want to get into why. Why this downgrade? Why now?
Yeah, so in terms of the negative impacts, when we've looked historically, usually being downgraded from AAA to AA+ doesn't in itself have much of an effect. The issue is once you're AA+, it means the next downgrade takes you to AA, and the next grade after that, takes you to single A and eventually to B. And those further downgrades can be costly. And so I'd look at this as it's kind of like a warning. It's a warning that if we don't get our act together, there could be consequences in the future.
And so as we look at those, both the consequences down the road, but let's talk about what the driving forces for this. Clearly, this shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone, not even in the administration. It shouldn't have been a surprise. Fitch has been warning about this as it relates to the debt and deficit and all of those kinds of things. Kind of break that down for us.
Yeah, so Fitch kind of pointed to 3 reasons for this downgrade. The one is our fiscal situation. Our debt is approaching the highest levels on record, higher than World War II as a share of the economy. Our deficits are rising. Our interest costs are eating the budget alive, eating our revenue. So that's number one. Our fiscal situation is out of control. Number 2, our governance has eroded. And this includes constant standoffs over the debt limit. We need to raise the debt limit to avoid defaulting. And every time we do that, we seem to get closer and closer to the edge. And that does not instill confidence to investors. And then thirdly, sort of the forward outlook. We have all these issues from the Medicare and Social Security trust funds to expirations of tax cuts to government shutdowns. And they don't have a lot of confidence in our system to address any of them.
And so let's jump into those for just a little bit. Obviously, this is looking at how secure it is, why the United States is a good or a bad place to put your money, investments and relationships and so on. And so if you look at those 3 areas, the overall fiscal issue, obviously debt, deficit spending being the big drivers there, the governance, the fact that Congress can't seem to do the very few jobs it's actually supposed to do, that we do end up in this shutdown, showdown every couple of months, it seems like nowadays, that we end up with another continuing resolution or a big omnibus to kick the can down the road just a little bit. And then I also want to get into this area that you mentioned that we have the host of these things on the horizon, the funding of things like Social Security and other programs, tax things that are coming off the books. Give us kind of an overall sense of what happens next? What's the road out of this mess?
Yeah, so it's ugly. On our current law course, meaning if we basically abide by the law, our debt is going to hit record levels in 5 years. Our interest costs are going to exceed the defense budget by then. Within 25 years, interest will be the single largest government program, and debt is going to rise unsustainably. We're at a crossroads at 2025 when a number of tax cuts expire. And if we extend them without any spending cuts or base broadening or tax break cuts, it's going to make that problem $3 trillion worse. And then meanwhile, all of our major trust funds are headed to insolvency. The Highway Trust Fund in 2028 or so, the Medicare Trust Fund in the early 2030s, the Social Security Trust Fund in 2033. And to give you a sense, I've been doing this for a while, and we always say you got to save Social Security for your kids or your grandkids. That's not the case anymore. It is 10 years from insolvency. So a new retiree today will only be 72 years old when the trust fund runs out of money. And the law says if we don't do anything, they get a 23% across-the-board benefit cut. And if we borrow to fill back up the trust fund, we're just making our underlying debt situation worse.
Right, which would also lead to increased in terms of interest rates, would also create all kinds of things in terms of just the rising price of inflation. And all of those things, I just want to point out to everybody, all of these things you can talk about in theoretical terms, but the way Mark just described that, those are real things and real people. And the people who always get hurt the most in any of these scenarios that Mark just described are the poor and the most vulnerable. And so some of the very folks that are supposed to be helped by a lot of these things are going to be hurt the most if we stay on this trajectory. So, Mark, take us to a step. What is something that can be done, that should be done, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum? I know the Biden administration is pointing fingers and placing blame, and the Trump administration is kind of shrugging shoulders, and it was not on their watch. How do we get out of the shoulder shrugging to a shoulder squaring? Here's a step. Here's something we can do.
Well, I'll give you 2 steps to start. The first step is we got to get back to governing. That means don't shut down the government. Like, come on, we already agreed. We already made a deal on the appropriations levels. People may not all like it, but we made a deal. Let's stick to that deal. Let's pass the appropriations. Let's pass a real budget next year. Go through the budget process. Let's just govern like grown-ups. That's step 1. Step 2, we need to deal with the drivers of our debt over time. And that's mainly the rising costs of health and retirement programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and from the other side, the failure of revenue to finance them. So we got to put the tax code on the table. We got to put Medicare on the table. We need to have a real adult conversation. That might be best to happen through a commission, through kind of outside process that isn't so politicized from the start, where people can debate and discuss and, like grown-ups, come to conclusions. But if we could do just those 2 things, start governing again and put together a commission to start addressing the drivers, that's going to prevent another downgrade, just that. And then we actually have to do the next step and pass those policies, so we get the debt in the right path if we actually want an upgrade back to that AAA that I hope someday we deserve.
Yeah, great insight, Mark. And if you don't take anything away else from the day, governing like grown-ups, do your job, Congress. There's 12 appropriations bills. As Mark said, we've agreed on the funding levels. Do the bills. You've got until the end of September. Let's get going. Let's get that done. Having a serious conversation, not a scary conversation, not just doing anger, fear, and frustration. Let's avoid the fake fights and the false choice when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, and let's get revenue on the table. Everything has to be on because the options are pretty limited. You cut spending, you raise revenue. Those are the 2 levers that really can be pulled, and those have to be on the table. Mark Goldwein, Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Fantastic insight today. Important that we keep that credit rating up, move it back in the right direction, but it is going to take some governing like grown-ups. Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Great insight from Mark Goldwein there. It's a serious conversation, and you can point fingers and place blame all you want, regardless of where you're on the political spectrum. That won't solve the problem. Governing like grown-ups actually will. We'll be right back.
A change in the weather is here.
We do have a chance for showers and storms from north to south.
And we'll be revising the outlook daily.
That extra cloud cover is going to help quite a bit to keep things on the cooler side.
Get traffic and the latest weather updates every 10 minutes on the 9s on KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
Sometimes people will ask me, Tim, how do you have all the energy you have to do all the things you do? And I have to tell you, a part of it is that I lost 34 pounds, a year and a half ago, and I've kept it off all this time. And I think back to when I was heavier, I would be by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd be exhausted because we get up so early. But now I have afternoon energy, and I know it's because I'm not lugging around that 34 pounds that I had been for how many years. I did it on SOTA weight loss. SOTA stands for state of the art.
And you're going to have the energy to do more, which is then going to help keep that weight off. We've said it before, but imagine go to the gym, pick up 34 pounds of weights and just walk around the gym for a while. It'll give you an idea of what you've been lugging around. My daughter lost 42 pounds, and she continues on the maintenance phase now. Find out how this company can help you or somebody in your family. Go to SOTAweightloss.com, spelled SOTA. Think Tim and Amanda, because SOTA Weight Loss is state of the art.
Hey, guys, are you over 30? Let's talk about testosterone and performance. Your testosterone can decline at an average of 1 to 2% a year after you turn 30. And Revive Men's Health have been experts at treating men with low testosterone and ED since 2011. We're the clinic guys come to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their performance. We love what we do and the patients we care for. You can ask our patients. We did, and we have a 99% patient satisfaction rate this year. Our patients even tell us we're more affordable than their insurance deductibles and copays. Let's get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. That's what we do, and we do it really well. Book your T-Check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or send us a private message at ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Ron had a tax problem he just couldn't handle on his own.
I owed the IRS taxes for over 5 years, but I didn't have any money to pay the taxes.
Those years cost him dearly.
Most of it was fees and interest. It was horrible.
Ron finally called in the pros.
I called Optima Tax Relief, and boy, am I happy I did.
The leading tax resolution firm, Optima, is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. They've resolved over $1 billion for their clients. Ron was overjoyed.
They settled my account with IRS. I was ecstatic. They are a lifesaver. They are. I am so happy.
Take Ron's advice and call Optima now for a free consultation.
Yeah, don't do like I did and wait. Call Optima Tax Relief. Do it now. You'll be ecstatic like me.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Maximize your energy savings with a new energy-efficient heating and cooling system from Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric today. Get up to $1,750 back and a free Nest thermostat when Yes buys back your old inefficient HVAC system. Proudly serving Utah for more than 45 years. Call now or visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio is your window to the outside world, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
Weather Service in Salt Lake City has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for northeastern Juab County in central Utah, southwestern Utah County in northern Utah, southeastern Tuala County in northern Utah until 2:45 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. At 1:45 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, severe thunderstorms were located along a line extending from 24 miles north of Delta to 8 miles south of Nephi, moving north at 30 miles per hour. Hazard, 60 miles per hour wind gusts and quarter-size hail. Source, radar indicated. At 1:20 p.m. a wind gust to 61 miles per hour was reported at the Sevier River Bridge along I-15. Impact, hail damage to vehicles is expected. Expect wind damage to roofs, siding, and trees. Locations impacted include Payson, Spanish Fork, Springville, Santaquin, Mapleton, Salem, Elk Ridge, Woodland Hills, Rocky Ridge, Vernon, Palmyra, Benjamin, Lake Shore, Spring Lake, West Mountain, Alberta, Utah Lake, Mona, Genola, and Goshen. This includes the following highways: Interstate 15 between mile markers 228 and 261. Plus Route 6 between mile markers 125 and 184. For your protection, move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a building. Repeating, a severe thunderstorm warning.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. Well, earlier in the year, President Biden made a statement that he would look at ways to get rid of the debt ceiling. Of course, that caused a large standoff in Congress and took several weeks to resolve. And we had, of course, the debt ceiling default, shutdown, showdown, all the things you can think of that make for fascinating politics, don't help anybody in terms of moving forward. Really interesting, though, when the president made that statement, progressives responded with a lot of enthusiasm, thinking that this would be a way to kind of get rid of these showdowns as it relates to the debt ceiling. I think their hope may have been a little short-lived, and they may be getting a little bait and switch, and so there's a little bit of consternation going on there. So we want to break all of that down, unravel it in terms of what it really is, what it really means, and really pleased to have back on the show Adam Cancun, White House correspondent for Politico. Adam, is always a great piece in Politico, talking about the president's strategy in talking about and at least trying to deal with the debt ceiling, but there's a lot of progressives that aren't too happy about it. So let's kind of back it up a little bit for our listeners. First, let's start with the debt ceiling in and of itself, and then what is it that the president alluded to or promised, and then what are we going to end up with?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's great to be back with you, Boyd. So if you recall, a few months ago, feels like a long time ago now, but just a few months ago, there was a long kind of standoff between the White House and House Republicans over raising the debt ceiling, which essentially is what was originally supposed to be a procedural vote that Congress takes every couple of years, just to say, hey, we've spent this much, this is our debt, and we're now authorizing the government to continue paying that debt. The problem is, though, that over the last several years, this has become a much more and more contentious vote because it is a must-pass vote to take. Suddenly, the party that's in the minority, House Republicans mainly, have been trying to use it to get policy concessions. So this is something that kind of went down to the wire once again. If you remember, we did the same thing in 2011. This time was between House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, President Joe Biden. McCarthy had a whole list of conservative policy concessions he wanted. And eventually they were able to work out a compromise that avoided a massive economic catastrophe and kept the debt ceiling raised and kept things going. The issue, though, is every single time you do that, it causes a lot of consternation, both to the economy, to voters, and to the global, to other countries who are watching this and worrying about ripple effects. So the idea here was, let's take a look at it, see if there are ways around that kind of a standoff every couple of years. And the way that the White House has proposed dealing with it is through essentially an internal working group, assigning a team of White House officials to really vet just every possible theory and option for avoiding this kind of a situation in the future.
Yeah, and so let's break that down just a little bit, unpack it. I think there were a lot on the left, on the progressive side, who were saying, okay, this is a chance to really do a significant change. Sounded like President Biden was on board. And then I think some have been a little disappointed that it's an internal working group. I think there's been a few who have said, look, the last thing we need is another blue ribbon panel or a commission to study a commission about a commission. So there is some definitely tugs and pulls there. But there is also something to the idea of an internal working group. And can we actually get to a range of things to have a different kind of conversation?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, progressives, and there's been a growing group of economists and executives who feel like the debt ceiling doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. We've already spent the money. This is just a vote to kind of authorize continuing to pay it. This feeling that it creates more of a political problem than it's worth. And the fact that a president was willing to say, you know what, maybe that side is right, the anti-debt ceiling caucus is right, let's take a look at it, that was seen politically as a huge step, right? Something that the White House was now willing to consider making a historic change. Now that we get down to it, the debt ceiling crisis has been averted, right? We don't now have to worry about another debt ceiling issue until 2025, beyond the next presidential election. There's a feeling, especially among progressives, a concern that by just naming a working group and saying they're going to look at it, it's a nice way of essentially kicking the can and saying, you know what, we don't really care about this anymore because it's not an immediate crisis. So what we're hearing a lot from progressives now is that they're saying, look, this is fine for now, but we want decisions that are quick, that are decisive, that will lead to some kind of actual concrete action over the next year. Otherwise, the U.S. is going to just end up in the same situation as again in 2025, staring down the barrel of possibly another economic disaster.
Yeah, and that perpetual kicking of the can down the road, I think, is wonderful. I think they've done this very strategically. Both sides, we always talk about conflict in Washington. This is collusion at its best. Both sides decided this is way better to kick past the 2024 presidential election. We'll kick it into 2025. And how do we ever get to the real conversation? Obviously, we have a spending problem going on in the country as we continue to have a need to keep raising the debt ceiling. Is there another lever within government? Is there another way within the institutions where we can actually have a serious conversation about, to me, it's the two drivers, right? It's spending and it's revenue. And if you're not willing to put both of those things on the table, we're going to keep having this same conversation as a political conversation rather than a serious governing conversation.
Exactly. And I mean, the Democrats' position, especially those who feel like the debt ceiling should be eliminated, say we already have essentially a governmental process, right? That's the appropriations process. It's every year Congress has to come together and pass a budget to continue funding the government. And that's no easy task either. We're, again, getting into a process as we get into the fall where we could be dealing with a government shutdown in the next few months. But that is a situation that is fully legislative, right? There is no real broader immediate risk to the economy. And so you talk to more and more Democrats, and they say that's how we should be resolving our problems. The issue, though, is one, tradition, right? Debt ceiling has been in place for about 100 years at this point, almost 100 years.
Yeah.
And also this feeling that there needs to be, especially on the right, there needs to be a bigger forcing mechanism, and the debt ceiling, with all of its consequences, acts as that every couple of years.
Yeah. Great insight as always. Adam Cancun, White House correspondent for Politico. Thanks so much for joining us today, Adam. Great stuff.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right, that wraps up hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back after top of the hour news.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. Our top story this hour.
Severe Utah weather. Special coverage on KSL News Radio.
The National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for parts of Juab, Utah, and Tooele counties through 2:45 this afternoon. Strong winds are expected in the area, along with hail that could cause damage to cars and buildings. The newly elected Utah County Clerk has asked his staff to get him voting records that he's legally not allowed to have. Aaron Davidson confirms he made the request, saying he wanted to run an analysis of the 2022 midterms for delegates who had questions.
It was a question, and it was a second opinion on the question. I should be able to ask several more people. I should be able to ask the county attorneys, what's your interpretation of me being able to see the cast vote records? I'm the election authority. People voted for me. People want answers.
The records he wanted are called cast vote records, essentially an electronic version of the ballots. A judge in Utah recently ruled these records cannot be unsealed after an election because they could be used to figure out how individuals voted. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. U.S. Capitol Police told staffers in the Senate office buildings to shelter in place this afternoon after they received a concerning 911 call about a possible active shooter. To this point, they have not located an actual shooter in the buildings. Former Vice President and current candidate Mike Pence spoke about his former boss's latest federal indictments today. his comments likely won't make Donald Trump happy. ABC's Andy Field has details from Washington.
Former Vice President Pence at the Indiana State Fair offering his toughest indictment of Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election.
Sadly, the president was surrounded by a group of crackpot lawyers that kept telling him what his itching ears wanted to hear.
Mr. Pence insisting former President Trump was wrong when he demanded he use powers the vice president doesn't have to send the election count back to the states. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
Your money at this moment? Near the close of trading, the Dow is down 347 points right now, just about 1%. The NASDAQ is down 310 points, or over 2% on the day. And our KSL weather, again, that severe storm warning in effect for parts of Juab, Utah, and Tooele counties right now. We'll have more coming up. KSL News Time 2:02.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
Looking for a trusted oral surgery practice? Look no further than Aspire Surgical. With a team of highly skilled and experienced board-certified oral and facial surgeons, Aspire Surgical offers a variety of surgical services, from wisdom teeth removal to dental implants to facial cosmetics. At Aspire Surgical, patient comfort and safety are top priorities. Their state-of-the-art facilities and advanced techniques ensure that patients receive the best possible care in a comfortable and safe environment. Visit their website at aspiresurgical.net or call 385-474-4952 to schedule a consultation today. Trust Aspire Surgical for all your oral surgery needs. Visit aspiresurgical.net or call 385-474-4952 to schedule a consultation today. Aspire Surgical, where your aspirations become a reality.
Hey, Doug.
Yes, Kathy.
Tell folks about Window World Doors.
Oh, yeah, thanks. We do entry doors, back doors, sliding patio doors, and storm doors.
And I just love the amazing door styles and the colors.
That's right, completely stained or painted, professionally installed with hardware.
So call us today, 801-281-8111.
Or visit windowworldutah.com.
Window World, simply the best for less.
That's no baloney.
The name's Osborne, Josh Osborne, and I'm so excited to announce our Double O summer sale here at Volkswagen Southtown.
Summers are for thrills, chills, and hot deals. Get a new high-tech VW for nothing down and no payments for 90 days. Our Double O agents are standing by to make sure you pay nothing down and have no payments for 3 months, so you can achieve your top secret mission this summer.
Come see why we're Utah's #1 Volkswagen dealer. Get to VWSouthtown.com.
2022 VW ranking. Financing through VCI on select models. OIC. See dealer for details.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
2 crashes northbound on I-215's West Belt. The cleanup continues at 1300 South California Avenue, and our latest is northbound I-215 at 700 North. Downtown, a 2-vehicle crash, 800 South and 200 West, and the cleanup of an accident westbound I-80 after Bangerter Highway. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, cooler today with a chance of thunderstorms this afternoon and evening. High 87, tomorrow 84, and then it'll dry out and warm up through the weekend. Once again, the National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for parts of Juab, Utah, and Tooele counties through 2:45 this afternoon. And right now we're at 70 degrees with the rain at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's Voice of Reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, the headlines, of course, for the last 24 hours have been about the third indictment that has been issued against former President Donald Trump. But we want to go past the headlines into the question of, now what? What comes next? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, now that the indictment has been issued, number 3, we expect there will be a fourth, likely coming from Georgia in the next week or so. But we want to get past just the headlines of all of those and the political backs and forths and actually get into what are the real implications in terms of the upcoming election cycle. Of course, the former president can still run for president. And of course, he is innocent until found guilty on all of those different indictments and charges. But we have to get past just that. That's the easy, high-level stuff. And that's where a lot of the chatter is. We want to get into, so what does this really mean, and how would it really impact the race in 2024? Now, very interesting, just about an hour ago, former Vice President Mike Pence took time to speak with reporters earlier today. He gave his thoughts on the latest indictment of the former president relating to January 6th and had some pretty interesting things to say.
For my part, I want people to know that I had no right to overturn the election, and that what the president maintained that day, and frankly has said over and over again over the last 2.5 years, is completely false. And it's contrary to what our Constitution and the laws of this country provide. Sadly, the president was surrounded by a group of crackpot lawyers that kept telling him what his itching ears wanted to hear. And while I made my case to him of what I understood my oath of the Constitution to require, the president ultimately, continued to demand that I choose him over the Constitution.
So that's, again, the former vice president, and that's as strong as he's been in terms of his former boss, his former running mate, in terms of choosing the Constitution over choosing then President Trump. So that's an important, I think, piece of the puzzle that will continue to play out. How do the other candidates running for president on the Republican side continue to deal with all of the indictment news about former President Trump? But there's an issue beyond that, and we actually dug into this yesterday just a little bit because I think this is kind of beyond the headline stuff. We had Henry Olsen on from the Washington Post, and he shared some really terrific insight in terms of what the indictment situation means for the former president. And the thing that you have to recognize is that in a presidential campaign, you are always dealing with finite resources. And those finite resources, of course, include money, include time, and I would even add to that, include energy. And you usually run out of energy before you run out of opportunity. The exhaustion sets in. So as I spoke with Henry Olsen yesterday, he talked about those two big scarce resources dealing with the money and the time.
Well, what the reports that came in over the last 48 hours show is that Donald Trump spent over $40 million in the last few months on legal fees out of his campaign account. So you hear that he raises $50 million or $80 million, but he's not spending it on the campaign. He's spending it on himself and on his legal defense. And if that continues, what that means is that he's not going to have the money to run a campaign against Joe Biden. That Biden and Democrats spent almost $2.6 billion with a B dollars in 2020. If the president is using his campaign money to pay for his legal fees, he's not going to be able to come close to what the Democrats can spend.
So on the money standpoint, again, the Biden campaign will have about $2 billion at least to spend. And if the former president becomes the nominee for the Republicans, if he continues to spend on legal fees on the rate that he is currently, he's simply not going to have enough money to compete with President Biden in a re-election campaign. So that's the dollars and cents of it. The other factor to keep in mind is time, limited resource as you go through 2024. And if the former president can't focus on campaigning, can't be at campaign events because he's dealing with legal issues, again, that makes it very difficult to actually win a general election.
When you're actively campaigning, you are flying around the country. You're having a rally in Las Vegas. You're then doing a rally in Denver and so forth and so on. That takes time. Well, if he's the defendant in 4 different criminal cases, that takes time too. There'll be time you'll have to spend in the courtroom. There'll be time you have to spend with lawyers. And I'll bet you not an inconsiderable sum, $10, that Donald Trump is going to care more about keeping himself out of jail than about campaigning, which is to mean that if you nominate Donald Trump, you're nominating somebody who's not actually going to campaign against Joe Biden because he has to campaign in the courtroom with the judge and the jury to keep himself out of jail. That's not a good look for conservatives.
And then finally, Henry, again from the Washington Post, talked about the fact that this actually creates a very interesting opportunity for some of the other Republican candidates.
First thing you have to recognize, a large part of Donald Trump's support is not going anywhere. Okay, but you're not campaigning for that. You're not campaigning for the 30 to 37% of the Republican Party that will never leave the president. You're campaigning for the people who, like Trump, think he's being unfairly treated but are willing to look at somebody else. I think a smart strategy for whoever is in that sweet zone, the person who appeals to the voter who can go either way, is to say, look, you have to ask yourself, how are we going to get Joe Biden out of the office? And given that Joe Biden has weaponized the Department of Justice, that would be the messaging. Given that he's tied the former president down, he's doing that so that he can get reelected. So maybe you shouldn't give him the choice he wants. Maybe you should vote for me, and I'm 80% as good as Trump, and I don't have 4 legal suits tying me down.
Okay, great perspective there from Henry Olsen from the Washington Post. And that is something that not a lot of folks are talking about today in connection with these indictments against the former president. If he is the nominee for the Republicans for 2024, he's going to face some finite resource issues. Money, if he's spending over half of what he's bringing in for his own legal defense, that's money not being spent on campaign efforts, getting the message out, getting the get out the vote effort, boots on the ground, all of those things that you have to do in a campaign to actually win an election. So the resources won't be there. He'll be outspent probably 2 to 1. And then there's the other resource, which of course is time. And finite commodity. We all get the same amount every day. But if you've got 4 indictments that you're dealing with, that means you've got to have meetings with lawyers, you've got court appearances, you've got things to review, you've got places you have to be. And every time you're doing that, you're not campaigning and you're not out there with the American people. So all of that adds up to some very interesting factors as it relates to the former president, the indictments, and the politics beyond that. And it'll be interesting to see what the Republicans choose to do, if they think there are enough resources, time and money to go down that path, or whether this does create a lane and a space for some of the other candidates running on the Republican ticket.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. KSL in your community is on the road again at the Utah County Fair. Join Maria Chaleos and Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News live from the fair, Thursday 3 to 7. Learn about this year's tasty treats, vendors, music, family entertainment, rodeos, and the fair's longtime host city, Spanish Fork. Thursday afternoon on KSL News Radio.
Everybody knows that exterior remodeling salespeople are all about the high-pressure sell. Am I right? Windows, siding, gutters, those suckers are going to twist your arm and get you to buy, or they won't leave your house at night. Tim Jr. here from RGS Exteriors, and I want you to know we don't have high-pressure cells. In fact, we don't even have salespeople. Nope, we have estimators. That's a huge difference. Estimators are trained to look at the entire scope of the project, to see and know if there are any problems, like rotten wood, wood-borne insects, or construction issues specific to your house or your neighbors. Salespeople are more concerned about playing those silly price games. Buy one, get one free, sign today and get 40% off, as if they didn't just jack the price up to give you a fake discount. RGS Exteriors estimators are going to give you a great quote. No games, no tricks, no nonsense. Call RGS Exteriors to quote your exterior project. Our number is 801-280-3110 or visit us at rgsutah.com. That's rgsutah.com.
Would you be upset if you lost $111,000 in retirement income? Get this, 96% of Americans, 96% lose an average of $111,000 in Social Security income. Learn how you could avoid this in a free report, the Social Security Decisions Guide from Boss Retirement Solutions, a 5-time winner of Utah's Best of State Award. If you've saved at least $200,000 and have not filed for Social Security, get this free report by calling 801-682-4448. This free report is loaded with critical information that can help you avoid losing $111,000 in Social Security income. So call 801-682-4448. That's 801-682-4448. Advisory services offered through Boss Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Insurance products and services offered through Boss Retirement Solutions.
You don't have to live in Britain to get what the New York Times calls the best of British telly. Stream the UK's most brilliant series only on BritBox. Unlock acclaimed favourites including Vera and Stonehouse, starring Succession's Matthew McFadden. Plus, don't miss upcoming original dramas like Archie, the story of Hollywood's greatest leading man, Cary Grant. Lose yourself in Britain's best entertainment, only on BritBox. Start a free trial at BritBox.com.
This could be the start of a break-in.
Stop. This is Simply Safe.
Or the end of one.
Police are on their way.
Introducing the latest innovation in home security. 24/7 LiveGuard protection, only from Simply Safe. Now, agents can see and speak to intruders through our new indoor camera to help stop crime in real time and for fast police response. Get 20% off any new system with Fast Protect monitoring at simplysafe.com/radio. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
Join KSL this Thursday from 1 to 4 at the Salt Lake NPS store at 1600 Empire Road, npsstore.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Millard, Juab, southern Utah County, and Tooele County, with strong wind gusts and quarter-sized hail reported. Second, the Utah County Clerk has been asking staffers for voting records that could show how individuals voted, and a previous court ruling says it's not legal for him to have them. And third, staffers in the U.S. Senate office buildings were told to shelter in place this afternoon after police received a 911 call about a possible active shooter. They haven't found one. Right now, 71 degrees with light rain in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
When it comes to our own health, physical health, mental health, it's so important for us to recognize that ignoring problems does not make them better, nor does it make them go away. Often dealing with those health challenges, again, whether it's mental or physical, is often the last priority for so many of us. In fact, some people are really good at making sure everyone else is taken care of, but they're the last priority. The pressures of life push in on everyone. And so we want to get into a discussion about how do we do that different? How do we take a little better care of ourselves? How can we avoid ignoring problems until they become so big, so painful that we just can't ignore them, or they become a major, major problem? And to help us break all of that down, we're thrilled to have back on the show, friend of the show, Gaina-Lynn Condie, very popular speaker and author and one of the great thinkers out there. Gaina-Lynn, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Boyd.
You had an experience that really kind of set my mind in motion, and so let's start with your experience, and then we're going to take the principles of that and apply them to a couple of different scenarios.
Well, I was listening to your intro, and I thought, I think Boyd called and talked to my kids because they have been nagging me about what you're referring to for about a year and a half now. And so I thought, I think Boyd talked to both my children in writing that little intro piece. So for those that follow me on social media, I publicly shared with kind of blocking and blurring the actual picture of the tumor. But I just last week had a tumor of significant size that is non-cancerous removed from my back. And we knew it was there, and we had been watching it, and my kids had been nagging me. And for those that are familiar with my life this last year, I shattered my wrist in January, and there were just a number of other professional, personal, and medical issues that kept needing my attention. But this tumor on my back had gotten to the point where it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was starting to be painful. The doctors thought it was like pressing on a specific nerve. So as it was growing, and if I was standing too long, I couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
And so I went in and had it removed. It was bigger than they thought, and thus propelled me, as often my own personal journey does, to posting about it and sharing about the fact that sometimes we try to ignore things. And what is the pain level by which we continue to ignore? And then at what point does it cross that threshold that the pain becomes like it's screaming at you to take notice. And so, that's kind of the most recent of many lessons I've learned along this line over my 52 years on the planet.
Well, let's dig into this, and we do want to make sure everyone knows it's non-cancerous, so we're thrilled about that. You got the right things done. Healing is happening. That's a very important thing, and I want to go into these lessons because there's so many of us that just find ourselves doing the same kinds of things, not only for physical pain, but for emotional pain, but career pain, a host of other things, relationship pain. And you laid out, as you always do, you are quick to observe and you are quick to name and then to talk about in an authentic way how we actually do this. And you listed out 5 things in terms of what we should do. So let's start going through those. You start with the one you first mentioned, and that is you actually have to notice it first. You at least have to be aware.
Right. And I think at some point there's things, whether it's professionally, mental health wise, physically, or in our relationships, where we don't notice it for a while until obviously there's something that shows up. For me, it was weird when I finally noticed it over a year ago and went into the doctor to address it. But I think I went into the doctor because I was dealing with something else, or I think I was taking a child at the time. And so it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to put me at the top of the list and address it. Because, I think when we do notice things, whether it's in areas of our mental health or relationships or professionally, we don't always want to notice it, or we don't always see it. I think it's when people around us that love us and are loving us enough to be honest with us. Sometimes it's others that will say, hey, I'm noticing this. I think we can notice it, or others can notice it, and hopefully you have people in your life that will tell you the truth. And then addressing it. We do want to ignore things at times. We all have long to-do lists, and there always seems to be a stewardship. I've talked on the show before about that principle that needs our attention. And in a number of my books, I talk about the glass ball and the rubber ball principle, that there's certain areas of our life that are glass balls on any given day, that if they drop, if you're a juggler, they will break. And the rubber balls of our lives, if they drop, they'll bounce. And what I lay out in a number of projects I've worked on is that if we ignore certain areas too long, the rubber balls become the glass ball. And so whether that's your health or your mental health or your financial health or relationships, if we're not, I'm not great at juggling per se, but I know people that are. I think at any given point, life will show us what is becoming a glass ball, whether it cracks or we start to feel the fragility in that area of our lives. And so addressing it sometimes becomes imperative because of that.
Yeah, and sometimes that ability to juggle prevents us from having the right conversation or actually noticing or addressing it. You talk about talking about it, which of course is crucial. Talk to me for a minute about number 4 you talked about, which was support it. What does that mean?
Well, and I think one of the best mental health tools I like to share with people, and I just shared it with my husband this morning as he messaged and said today just feels, like the to-do list and the overwhelm is taking over. I like to ask myself, what does support look like on any given day that can be different? And sometimes when an area of your life has gone on too long and has been ignored too long, you don't even know the answer to that question. You don't even know what support looks like. And so I would say just taking a minute each day and checking into the various stewardships of your life, the areas of your life that we're all responsible as humans to address, asking yourself what support looks like. For me, it was getting into the doctor, getting the information, and then at a certain point, I needed to talk about what was happening, and I did that and scheduled, it's time to now address it. And so I think it's talking to the right people, whether that's hiring someone and paying someone for their perspective because they're a professional in that given area, or it's talking to a close, trusted friend. And I am so grateful for the few friends in my life, you're on that list, where I know they're going to tell me the truth. I think we can sometimes fill our lives with a lot of people that tell us what we want to hear.
Right.
I think great leaders and effective people in our lives, and like you said, we all get really good at juggling at certain points. we all hit walls where it all comes crashing down. So asking yourself what support looks like and talking to the right individuals to help you in the next steps, which, is finally removing it if necessary. And whether that's a job change or a medical procedure or getting into a place where you have the support to step out of relationships that aren't serving you any longer, that's easy for a post on social media. The actual process of doing these 5 steps is a whole nother layer of vulnerability.
Yeah, and we call that the hard work and heavy lifting portion of the program.
Yeah.
It was so interesting in conjunction with the 24th of July holiday. I had a chance to sit down with Elder D. Todd Christofferson, an apostle in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we talked about this idea that for pioneers, they had this unique ability of if something was no longer helping them or moving their cause forward in their whatever their pioneering effort was, they had to remove it. They had to leave it at the side of the road. And sometimes it wasn't just leaving something that was no longer helpful, or maybe it had become a burden, but they also had to just prioritize. And sometimes they had to leave some really nice, good stuff at the side of the road, whether it was, fine china or a piano or a rocking chair, or whatever it might be. And as I was going through your list, Gaina Lynn, I was thinking on that remove it. It's like, okay, what do I need to reprioritize? What do I need to leave at the side of the road? What do I just need to remove from my life so I have enough space to have that health, that energy, that focus, that confidence to move it all forward? And so as you've gone through this, obviously we're not happy you had the tumor. We are glad you got it removed. And we're really grateful for the principles because they apply in just so many different areas for us.
Well, side note, I loved seeing both you, Elder Christofferson, and you in the parade yesterday in the heat of the day. And I love that idea of what pioneers had to walk away from. I also recently posted about a job loss in my life and that process of creation that we all are a part of, where sometimes something dies not because of our choice, but because of extenuating circumstances. Sometimes that removal is forced upon us. I love to be more intentional in my life, and I try to be wise of what needs to be removed before it gets to the point. My kids felt like the tumor went on way too long. And I'm grateful I didn't wait much longer, because that pain of removal versus the pain of ignoring it, that percentage in our lives is sometimes where we decide, hey, you know what, the uncomfortable pain, the additional pain that's not necessary is calling to me at this point. The pain of having it removed, and then the last week and a half of trying to repair and have my body go through the healing process hasn't been comfortable, but the pain of ignoring it had become more uncomfortable. And I think that same analogy can be applied to whatever it is. And when you mentioned the pioneers, right, they didn't know what pain they were always going to have to walk through, but the cause was bigger, and that's what propelled them forward. And so they lived through that pain, knowing that hopefully what was awaiting them was better. I often say, I wouldn't have made a great pioneer. I probably would have done fine until I made it to the valley. And then when I realized that I still had to build a house and plant crops, that's when I probably would have lost it, and sat down by the wayside and said, wait a minute, I did fine leaving the china and the piano. What do you mean I've got to build a house and plant crops now?
I'd still be out there looking for a Marriott somewhere along the way.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to do something really unique. We often talk about staying with the question a little bit longer. This time we're going to stay with the answerer. We're going to continue our conversation with Gaina Lynn coming up after the break. Things we can learn from all faiths and from no faith at all. Stick around. Fascinating conversation coming up right back here on KSL News Radio.
Weather Service in Salt Lake City has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for southern Salt Lake County in northern Utah, northwestern Wasatch County in northern Utah, northwestern Utah County in northern Utah, east central Tuella County in northern Utah until 3 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. At 2:26 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, severe thunderstorms were located along a line extending from near Tuella Army Depot south to near Brigham Young University, moving north at 35 miles per hour. Hazard, 70 miles per hour wind gusts and quarter-size hail. Source, radar indicated. Impact, hail damage to vehicles is expected. Expects considerable tree damage. Wind damage is also likely to mobile homes, roofs, and outbuildings. Locations impacted include Provo, Heber City, Orem, Lehigh, Draper, Pleasant Grove, Springville, American Ford, Eagle Mountain, Heber, Linden, Alpine, Daniel, Cedar Ford, Vineyard, Ophir, Brigham Young University, Wasatch Mountain State Park, Tuella Army Depot South, and Utah Lake. This includes the following highways: Interstate 15 between mile markers 262 and 285. Bus Route 40 between mile markers 13 and 24. For your protection, move to an interior room on the lowest floor of a building. Torrential rainfall is occurring with these storms and may lead to flash flood.
It's 2:32 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Thermo Fisher is closing down a facility in Ogden. They only opened the plant a year ago. Here's KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe.
The building in Ogden that opened just a year ago has a completely empty parking lot today. A company spokesperson told me they are temporarily ceasing operations here. This is after the company fired dozens of people at their Logan facility earlier this year. And it's a big surprise to those I've spoken to in the Ogden area. The company reported they had spent $44 million to build here. It's not totally clear why the temporary closure is happening, but the company also reported a $10 billion loss in revenue in the last quarter compared to last year. Reporting in Ogden, Amy Kobabe, KSL News Radio.
Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A man in federal custody is accused of kidnapping a woman in Washington state, violently assaulting her and imprisoning her in a cinder block cell in his home in Klamath Falls, Oregon. The investigation began when the woman escaped. FBI Special Agent in Charge Stephanie Shark told a news conference that the suspect, 29-year-old Nagasi Zuberi, is a violent sexual assault offender who's lived in several different states.
To date, Zuberi has been linked to at least 4 sexual assaults in 4 other states. We believe there may be more victims.
And one of those states the FBI is concerned about is Utah. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average ending the trading day down 348 points, the NASDAQ down 310, the S&P 500 down 63. And our KSL weather, we do have that severe thunderstorm warning affecting Salt Lake, Wasatch, and Utah counties. We'll have more on that just ahead. KSL News Time, 2:34.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think.
All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Hey guys, if you're a patient at another Wave clinic for ED, Revive will transfer your care for free. And for those that medically qualify, we'll give you 4 Wave treatments for free, plus a 1-month supply of ED medication when you start Wave treatment with us. Our Renaissance Wave therapy is proven, non-invasive, and far more affordable than other Wave clinics. Book your consultation today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Trouble in traffic on I-215 southbound in Taylorsville. Crews have a right lane blocked off. Not sure if this is an accident or a load spill. It's going to take them a little bit to get it cleaned up. And this is as you're traveling westbound on the South Belt, passing Redwood Road on the way to turn northbound. Expect a little bit of delay in that area. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather. Let's repeat that severe thunderstorm warning issued just now by the National Weather Service. It covers the southern part of Salt Lake County, northwestern Wasatch, northwestern Utah County, and eastern Tooele County till 3 o'clock this afternoon. Strong winds, heavy rain, and possible quarter-size hail expected out of this. And right now, 73 degrees, mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Get deeper insights on the news from inside sources.
Well, we're not going to stay with the same question, but we are going to continue the conversation with our guest, Ganel-Lyn Condie. Of course, she's a prominent voice here in the state of Utah and around the world. She's a speaker, an author, podcaster, and just an extraordinary thinker, and helps all of us get into different places and spaces that maybe we would skip across if we didn't stop and really engage and think. And one of the things that Ganel-Lyn has been involved with over the years is just engaging in a curious, important kind of conversation with people of different faiths and people of no faiths, for that matter. And so what we wanted to look at today is, what do we learn? What do we learn by talking with people who think different, believe different, live different than we do? And then how do we all grow when we engage in conversations like that? And so, Ganel-Lyn, I want to jump into some of the things that you pointed out on your social media channels this week in terms of things that we can do. I always talk about it in terms of holy envy, and I have holy envy for a whole lot of folks in all kinds of different faith traditions. But give us a couple that really have been important to you in terms of how do we value that, how do we see the beauty in that, and how do we gain from that?
So I am so grateful for the conversations you have on the air in that space of interfaith, and I have that same holy envy sometimes that you're on air with people that I feel so much better about how I see the world because I hear how they see the world. I grew up in a community that was very interfaith, diverse. The wide diversity of my social structure from those teenage years, I was often the token member of my faith in my circles of friends. And for that, I feel so grateful because they would reflect back to me how they saw how I saw the world. And because of that, I have continued to try to raise my kids in a community where there was a predominant faith, that with this lens, that don't assume that you know anything about someone because you see them in your congregation on Sunday, and don't assume you know something about someone if you don't see them there. Yeah. And that kind of curiosity, I hope my children have carried that out into the world as they've gone out and become adults and had conversations with people. But first and foremost, I've had the opportunity to host for the last 4 seasons a show from a specific lens of my faith. And that show, unfortunately, is ending, but the last episode just dropped on Friday, and I thought it was interesting that both my co-host and I, kind of where we started is where we ended. And where I ended was that specifically what I've learned from certain individuals of other faiths. One, I've learned from my Muslim brothers and sisters a greater sense of praying and fasting, which within my faith I do, but because of travels and opportunities to be in Muslim countries, I've seen it at a heightened level. And it caused me to see the power of that maybe I did more as a habit at times if I'm not careful. And when I watch others, especially within the Muslim community, do it at a different level, I'm changed. My Catholic friends have taught me so much about sacrifice. Recently, our family was in D.C. for the 4th of July, and on the way home, I posted about meeting a new friend, which my family sometimes doesn't love traveling with me because I'll talk to the stranger for so long. But it was a young girl that was close to the age of my children, and she's 2 years away from taking her final vows as a Catholic nun. And she's changed her name. She's moved away. She taught me so much about devotion as we stood there in this airport and talked about what devotion looks like for her. I could go on and on, but I think that you and I both share this love of having interfaith conversations, because when we talk to people of other faiths and we see how they keep their faith, it changes how we can keep our faith. And sometimes that difference scares us.
Yeah.
I find that's where I find my greatest sources of divinity, when I see the diversity around me.
Yeah, and that's such an important component to all of that. When we, the world and society and politics all want us to see every difference as a reason for division, as opposed to being able to see the dignity and even the divinity in those differences, I think is so vital. And I had something recently with Jonathan Rauch, who is an atheist, that really made me rethink a lot of our conversations around faith in this country. As an atheist, I think he delivered the greatest case ever for the need for faith in a democracy or in a constitutional republic. That, there are just things that can't be done through government, no matter how accurate or good or in good intentions it may be. Things that just need to happen in families, in homes, in neighborhoods, community, congregations, all of those kinds of things. And so I think that's a vital part of all of this. One of the things that you pointed out, Galen, that I wanted to get to, two I want to sneak in before we get to the top of the hour. So one is just this idea of just noticing the beautiful. How do we get to that holy envy space? And then how do we do that? You also said when we rest, that's also a space where faith can grow and where we can actually learn that from maybe someone who practices their faith a little bit different.
So I was having a conversation with my daughter who's serving an 18-month mission for our faith, and we were talking about faith and that fear of sometimes praying to God and asking for our faith to increase. Not sure if God's going to teach us that through some hard stuff.
Right.
And so I invited her to consider how we can see our faith growing in the simple, in the beautiful, and the miraculous. And I love having interfaith conversations because I think that's where I see the beauty of faith. And I love that you mentioned our friends that are atheists and maybe faith isn't part of their journey. But we live in a society that doesn't always celebrate keeping faith and being devoted and practicing our worship practices in the individual ways we do that. And so I was sharing with my daughter, can we see faith in the fact that I could DoorDash her donuts? And I know that sounds like a simple thing, but the mothers out there will understand. My son served a 2-year mission for our church in Africa where I couldn't DoorDash him. And so yesterday when I was able to do that, I saw God in that. And sometimes we want to see God in these big, massive strokes of miraculous experiences. And yet when I bring it down to the simple, the everyday, for me, that's where I find God. And when I talk to my friends of other faiths and they reflect back to me how they see God, I have a friend that attends the Calvary Baptist Church here locally in Utah, and she's so much my resource when I need something prayed for because she prays in this really beautiful, specific way. To me, I see God in that. My friend Pastor Logan says sometimes we try to make our interfaith conversations about what we share that's the same. And I think that's our human nature to want to feel comfortable when we see the similarities between us. But he pointed out to me there's beauty in seeing our differences, that there's something that our Jewish friends can teach us about their faith and the sacrifice and trauma that group has come from that's different than maybe what I come from. And so instead of quickly wanting to go to our sameness, what if we leaned into our differences? And I think that's where God sees us, and he approaches each of us differently. He knows that for me as a mom and for my daughter, it's showing up in donuts, being DoorDash, and not necessarily in celebrating Sabbath on a Friday.
Great insight as always from Ganel-Lyn Condé. Always appreciate her perspective on all of that. We're going to step aside for one last break. When we come back, we're going to talk about conflict versus collusion, outrage over the absolute predictability of consequences when it comes to the U.S. debt rating that has just been lowered today by Fitch. Why it happened, why nobody should be surprised. We'll talk about that coming up next.
Is shopping for medical supplies online leaving you feeling intimidated and overwhelmed? Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent with Alpine Home Medical. I want to share a real customer story with you.
The moment I walked into Alpine, I felt cared for. They pulled me into a private room, and the Alpine professional happily set up my CPAP machine, explaining everything I needed to know. The service didn't stop there. After I went home, Alpine called me a week later just to check on me. These guys really are the experts. Before Alpine, I was so stressed trying to navigate what I needed online by myself, but all the stress went away when I went to their store. They really do deserve 5 stars.
We know when you walk through our doors, you deserve to be cared for. Stop by any of our 11 locations and discover the Alpine Home Medical difference. When you need assistance, we're here for you.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
AlpineHomeMedical.com.
Would you be upset if you lost $111,000 in retirement income? Get this, 96% of Americans, 96%, lose an average of $111,000 in Social Security income. Learn how you could avoid this in a free report, the Social Security Decisions Guide from Boss Retirement Solutions, a 5-time winner of Utah's Best of State Award. If you saved at least $200,000 and have not filed for Social Security, get this free report by calling 801-682-4448. This free report is loaded with critical information that can help you avoid losing $111,000 in Social Security income. So call 801-682-4448. That's 801-682-4448. Advisory services offered through Boss Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Insurance products and services offered through Boss Retirement Solutions.
Do you know why more homeowners choose Any Hour Services for help when it's time to replace their air conditioners? What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and the main reasons people choose Any Hour Services is because of our people, processes, and convenience. People tell us all the time that there's just something different about having an Any Hour Services technician in their home. That's why most of our over 18,000 Google reviews mention our technicians by name. Another reason is our 7-step install process that we call the Any Hour Difference. It all starts with the needs analysis, where you explain what you like and dislike about your current system. This helps us design and size a system that fits your comfort and efficiency preferences as well as your home's airflow requirements. As for convenience, most of our installs are completed in one day. We also have flexible, no money down financing options available, even if you've been told no in the past. So if you've been thinking about getting a new air conditioner, call Any Hour Services and schedule a free estimate today. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
At Grainger, we're for the ones who pay attention to every little detail. The ones who fuss, tinker, and sweat the small stuff. Because you know the tiniest thing can make the biggest difference when it comes to keeping business moving. We get it. We're the same way, offering access to product experts to help you quickly and easily find what you need. So whatever your industry, you know you're always getting professional-grade products. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Nothing slows my little girl down, except a stuffy nose.
Mommy.
That's why I use Sinex Children's Saline from Vicks. Sinex instantly clears mucus in everyday stuffy little noses with a gentle, ultra-fine mist designed for kids. Just Sinex? Breathe. Her stuffy nose is gone for now. And so is she.
Sinex Children's Saline. Sinex, breathe. Use as directed, keep out of reach of children.
Join Mike Stevens of Capital Wealth Advisors for Retire Right Radio, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. That's Retire Right Radio with Mike Stevens, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It is great to be with you today, as it always is. I am Boyd Matheson. And as we round out the program today, a little bit of a head-scratcher for me. The Fitch Ratings firm downgraded the United States government credit rating. Now, they had warned for months that they were going to do this based on a number of factors. But today, when they actually followed through and downgrading the United States from a AAA rating to a AA plus rating, there was shock and awe in Washington, D.C. And the only thing that's surprising to me about this downgrade is that anybody on the entire planet is surprised by what happened today. It is the absolute predictability of consequences. Janet Yellen was puzzled by the decision.
Fitch's decision is puzzling in light of the economic strength we see in the United States. I strongly disagree with Fitch's decision, and I believe it is entirely unwarranted. Its flawed assessment is based on outdated data and fails to reflect improvements across a range of indicators, including those related to governance, that we've seen over the past 2.5 years. Despite the gridlock, we've seen both parties come together to pass legislation to resolve the debt limit, as well as to make historic investments in our infrastructure and American competitiveness.
Soon after that statement from Janet Yellen saying she was puzzled, perplexed by the downgrade, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre made her own statement, saying that the administration strongly disagreed with the decision, immediately turned to point fingers at the Trump administration, and that if there is any downgrade, it is a Trump downgrade, not a Biden downgrade. Now, here's the deal. If you're complaining about the rules or the referees, you're losing. And if you're going to lead, you have to lead. And you can't just shrug your shoulders, say, not my fault, not my job, and hope it all goes away. No, the reason there was a downgrade was absolutely predictable. In fact, Fitch itself has warned about this for a very long time. Some people go all the way back to 2011, of course, when there was a downgrade in the midst of another debt and deficit and spending battle in Congress. And there was a downgrade, which, by the way, has not been changed. We have not received an upgrade coming after what took place in 2011. And so anyone who's surprised by any of this, that's surprising to me. Nobody should be surprised. This is the absolute predictability of consequences. And Fitch was very specific in their reasoning behind the downgrade. They talked about governance, the fact that you do actually have to govern like grown-ups, that you can't just keep kicking the can down the road. I think it's equal opportunity offense in terms of the spending in this country. When you look at the challenges coming up with the social safety net programs, the insolvency that is on the horizon that is going to have to be dealt with in one shape or another is going to put an enormous strain on government, on the economy, and a host of other things. When tax cuts are scheduled to expire, you have to look at what is the impact of that going to be. And there's a host of things that you have to look at. There's revenue and there's expenses. Anyone who's sat around a kitchen table or has run a small business or a lemonade stand, you know the absolute predictability of consequences. And what Fitch is saying is we don't like the direction. We don't like where you're headed. We don't like the way you're governing. And that creates added risk. There's many who have said that this could impact a number of things, from municipal debts to increased challenges for credit card debt holders, all of those things. But for Janet Yellen to come out and just say, well, we don't like the rules, we don't like the process, and we don't like Fitch ratings as a referee. Again, if you're complaining about the rules of the referee, you're losing. That's not a winning argument. And this is one of those, you can complain about the left and you can complain about the right. And you'll be right about the left and you'll be right about the right. We often talk about conflict in Washington being a big problem. This is classic collusion that is the problem, because we continue to spend money that we don't have. I actually wrote a piece a few years ago when the national debt was a mere $20 trillion. And at that moment, Michael Mullen, this is all the way back in 2010, he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So that's military. That's national security. And Admiral Michael Mullen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said in 2010, the most significant threat to our national security is our debt. And yet, members of both political parties continue to act as if there are no consequences for not dealing with the issues. So, do we need to have a conversation about the solvency of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid? Yes, we do. And not a political one. Not so you can beat somebody over the head with it. Do we need to have a conversation about revenue? Yes, we do. Do we need to have a conversation about welfare? Yes. Do we need to have a conversation about corporate welfare and government picking winners and losers and padding the pockets of the well-to-do and the well-connected, those who can afford lawyers and lobbyists in Washington, D.C.? Yes, yes, and yes. But nobody should be surprised today. It's shocking that anybody's surprised today. When the debt ceiling fight was going on just a couple of months ago, Fitch was very loud and very specific in saying, look, if this continues, there will be a downgrade. And that will have a ripple effect. It will have an impact. And so rather than sitting around and saying, well, it's their fault or it's their fault, and trying to convince the country that we're just so divided, that we have these conflicts and therefore we can't govern, this is collusion. Both sides say, okay, we'll spend some more, and we're going to watch this. Fortunately, we have a few weeks where Congress is out of session. Sadly, they're going to come back and have about 15 legislative days to pass 12 spending bills, the appropriations bills, that they're required by the Constitution to do every year, which we haven't done for decades. But instead, we do omnibuses, we do continuing resolutions, and we just continue to spend. And that is their choice. But we cannot ignore the absolute predictability of consequences. And Fitch lowering the rating of the United States debt from AAA to AA today is absolutely a predictable consequence of the behavior of both the right and the left in our nation's capital. This is not rocket science. This is the absolute predictability of consequences. So no surprises today, just results, just outcomes based on what's been done, and we have to do better. Well, that wraps it up for Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts.